select, and of course, the big green screen. But what if I told you that there was a Game Boy that was actually in this orientation? Well, I know you might be saying, well, it's the Game Boy Advance, of course. You would be wrong. Well, you would be right, actually. You would definitely be right. But for the purpose of this epic intro to a video, you would be wrong. Introducing the horizontal Game Boy. Was that epic? I don't know. Game Fighter. This is one of the most desirable Game Boys that money can't buy because they never come up for sale. And if they do, they come up for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars or pounds or euros or other currencies are available. This is honestly such an honor to be able to make a video on one of these things. And I have to say a massive thank you to Joan for lending this to me. He is an absolute legend. This is such a beautiful thing. We've got so much to take a look at. The details of this thing are just beautiful. You know, I actually have another horizontal Game Boy, but in comparison to this, it looks like a McDonald's toy. I mean, not to mention there's a massive burn on the screen, which is unfortunate. But yeah, this is called the Mega Game, and this also is an off license. That's not the right word. An aftermarket Game Boy. It's just a knockoff piece of junk. But this one is far more accurate to the original one. So yeah, I mean, it's just an absolutely glorious device. I can't believe I have it in my hands. We've got a lot to look at. We're also going to open it up. We're also going to turn it on. I've got some other fake Game Boys. Let's begin. I think the first thing that we can begin by doing is moving the camera in and taking a look at some of the details closer up. Before we go any further, massive thank you to PCBWay for sponsoring this video. PCBWay is your one-stop solution for all of your little home project tech DIY needs. They offer CNC machining, 3D printing, sheet metal fabrication, and injection molding, which means you can make proper finished cases for your home project. And what do you put inside those cases? PCBs. And you better know that PCBWay, they dabble, they offer a few PCBs. Let's take a look on their website. Flex and Rigid Flex PCBs, flexible PCBs, Rigid Flex PCBs. Did they need all three listed? Aluminum PCBs, metal core PCBs, high frequency PCBs, high TG PCBs, thick copper PCBs. And don't just take my word for it, listen to what Matthew has to say.
I use PCBWay.
Check out PCBWay using the link in the description. Back to the video. So, when I say that this thing is accurate to the original, I mean if you were to close your eyes and put this in your hands, everything about it, the weight, the sounds, the feel, everything feels like a completely genuine Game Boy. It is mind-blowing how perfectly accurate this is to the original. Even down to the point where the texture of the plastic, which might be something that's quite hard to work out on camera, even the texture of the Game Boy is identical. I've got some other fake Game Boys here. Obviously, we've got this one I just showed you. It doesn't feel or look anything like it. The color is also very off, although I think this one has sort of gone a little bit yellow over the years. But if I pull over this one, this is another clone Game Boy. This one is obviously a bit more of an attempt at duplicating it identically, or more or less. But yeah, this one as well, completely smooth. And then we've got another one over here as well, completely smooth. And then I have a final one down here. This one is a little bit closer in the texture, although it's clear, but there was actually clear Game Boy, so this one would look fairly similar, but they have not attempted to actually sort of make a clone of the Game Boy. This one has some very distinctive and unique features. Now, obviously this one isn't an actual clone of the Game Boy in its look, but in its hardware, it is actually a clone. This thing runs official Game Boy games, and I mean all of these do as well, but it's just such a beautiful device, and arguably a far more suitable way of playing games for a long period of time than like that. I mean, this is still great, but I have a much better grip like this. I have much bigger hands. I mean, a DMG is huge. My hand is way bigger. I feel like I make a DMG look small. But yeah, this is just an absolutely stunning thing. I love the little attention to details, you know, like you've got these little curved edges down here as well, which match the original Game Boy as well. And on top of that, when you flip it over, you've got the same sort of crenellations or designs that go into the actual Game Boy shell. They kind of cut out. But what I think is fantastic is while they've got all of these details, they've actually redesigned it in a completely unique way. It's so glorious, and everything, the color of the buttons, the color of the text, the D-pad, everything like that is identical, but then you've got this completely unique shell design, which is just absolutely stunning. And there's quite a lot of people nowadays that are modifying Game Boys, and they're 3D printing shells like this, and they're doing mods to Game Boys to try and make them horizontal, because this is just such a beautiful thing. But this is where it all started, right here with the Game Fighter. Of course, you've got the dot matrix with stereo sound at the top as well. This is right up my street. Honestly, this is just such a treat to look at something like this on the channel. I am so grateful that Joan could send this out to me. Look, even at the power switch, you've got that little knob at the top, the little, oh, we turned it on, spoilers. The contrast wheel as well. The contrast wheel is at the top, which is actually the same with all of these knockoff devices. I have a feeling they probably all use the same screen, which means that this could be saved with something else. But yeah, if you take a look, they've all got those sort of contrast wheels on the top, and this one is no different. If we flip it over, we've got the volume wheel underneath just there, and then we've got the phones and DC 6-volt in, nothing on this side and nothing on this side. And then of course on the back, we've got our cartridge slot there, and then it takes 4 AA batteries, exactly like an original Game Boy would. And unfortunately, the tabs on the battery cover here have snapped off, so it doesn't quite stay in perfectly, but because it locks in, it is more or less perfect. But I'm sure someone could probably 3D print something new for that, but it does actually work quite well. It just has a little flap there. So before we take a look inside the Game Fighter, let me just show you some of the differences with how it actually acts. So when you turn it on, the black bar appears straight in the center of the screen, and obviously you get a bunch of different sort of artifacts on the screen as you're turning it off and on. Now, I'm not entirely sure on the technical details as to what's going on inside here, but obviously the chip that is actually being used to play these Game Boy games is not going to be the same as this. So whatever sort of software the Game Boy has on that chip, it is slightly different to the original one, which is to be expected. They have actually copied it, but just to remind you, or not copied it one for one, but you know, they've had to make some sort of copy of it to play the games, but they've not duplicated it identically. But just to remind you, the original Game Boy, it lowers down to the center of the screen and then makes a little ding just after the really loud noise out there. But yeah, you can see it's very, very different. So let's go ahead and plug a game in. So if I just pop these battery covers back on, and one of the games that he sent me with it is this. It's a 4-in-1, but it's a Chinese game. And what's really interesting is I think that this could be a genuine cartridge. The quality of it is just so good. It's really, really hard to work out if this is not a genuine cartridge, but I've seen and held many, many Game Boy cartridges over the years, and this one feels so good, but as does this, as does the plastic on this, so perhaps this came with it. I don't know, but Chinese Game Boy games are quite desirable, so it would be very interesting to see if this is genuine. We'll open this up as well at the very end, but I'm more curious to see what's inside here. But let's go ahead and pop this game in and turn it on. There we go. Did you hear that noise? It made a big, loud noise, and then the Nintendo logo came on, and it took a much longer time for it to actually load up. So here we go. We've got R-Type. We've got Ninja Spirit. We've got a Chinese one, and then we've got Match Mania. So I'm going to try and play a little bit of R-Type. This is going to